Welcome back. You're watching News X World. My name is Vineet Malhotra, and we start with the top stories of today. US President Donald Trump has stated that Israel has agreed to the initial withdrawal line and that Hamas agreement will trigger an immediate ceasefire and pave the path to return of hostages and prisoners by both sides. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu warns that the demilitarization of Gaza will happen either by Trump's plan or by Israel's military after agreeing to the initial withdrawal proposal made by US President Donald Trump. Germany's Foreign Minister Johann van der Poel is visiting the Gulf region to discuss Trump's Gaza plan. He will meet Qatar's Prime Minister and then join EU and GCC foreign ministers in Kuwait. Well, the activists detained by Israel from the global Sumud flotilla have now been released and have alleged severe mistreatment in Israeli custody, particularly with Swedish activist Greta Thunberg, who the activists claim was dragged and abused by Israeli police. Well, Syria is holding its first parliamentary elections 10 months after rebel groups led by Ahmed al-Shara, the current president, overthrew Bashar al-Assad to end a brutal civil war. The election is not being held across the entire country, with provinces like Sweda, Raqqa and Hasaka excluded due to recent unrest. Billionaire Andrei Babi's populist ANO party has taken a commanding lead in the Czech Republic's parliamentary election, but is on track to fall short of a majority. With ballots from more than 97% of polling stations counted on Saturday, ANO had 35% of the vote, and according to the Czech Statistical Office, Prime Minister Peter Fiala's centre-right Spolu alliance trailed with 23%. Heavy rains triggered landslides and flash floods, blocking roads, washing away bridges and killing at least 22 people in the last 36 hours in Nepal. The North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said that Pyongyang has allocated strategic assets to respond to the buildup of US military forces in the south and vowed to develop additional military measures. North Korea's state-run television KRT aired footage of Kim delivering a speech at a military hardware exhibition ahead of the 80th founding anniversary of the Workers' Party of Korea. All right, starting with our top story, Israeli Defence Minister Israel Katz has said that nearly 900,000 Palestinians have been displaced in Gaza City since the IDF launched its offensive. He cited the occupation of Gaza, collapse of multi-story buildings and intensity of military operations as the main reasons for mass evacuations to the south. Katz added that this move has placed immense pressure on Hamas and its supporters. And before the offensive began in late August, the United Nations estimated that around 1 million people lived in and around Gaza City and the largest urban center in the Gaza Strip. Ahmed Fatou, spokesperson for the Fatah movement, is joining us at this point in time from Ramallah. Ahmed, appreciate you joining us at this point in time. Well, almost 1 million people have been displaced in this offensive, which was started by Israel. But now it seems that Donald Trump and both Netanyahu have agreed to a plan to halt hostilities. Is this something likely to work and, bring these people back to their original dwellings?
Thank you for having me. First, what Katz said is admitting that he's committing a war crime by displacing 900,000 Palestinians out of their home, which is a breach to international law and the Geneva Conventions. So he's bragging about being a war criminal on live TV. Now, Trump said to Israel, told Israel to stop the bombardment, to stop all hostilities, but Israel is bombing the Palestinians and killing children. Just recently, they have bombed safe zones while parties are negotiating in Egypt. So that is not a good gesture for peace. Rather, they are investing every last minute to kill and destroy for aimless goals, actually, for no aim, because we are going after a peace deal, yet they are still taking these last moments to kill children, and that is a catastrophe. Now, I hope the pressure from the United States would rise to make Israel stop this hostility, this genocide immediately, and to begin for the process of bringing peace and the discussion for the final solution for the question of Palestine based on the international law, and to bring justice to this cause after 77 years of injustice.
Ahmed, stay with us. Well, meanwhile, Palestinians continued searching through rubble in Gaza following deadly Israeli strikes, and local health officials have confirmed this. Dozens were killed on Saturday despite US President Donald Trump urging Israel to halt bombings, and after Hamas said it was ready to free hostages under their peace plan. Listen in to what some of the residents had to say.
مساء الأمس تعرض مربع كامل في حي التفاح لقصف همجي إسرائيلي في ظل توارد أنباء عن صفقة محتملة وموافقة الفصائل الفلسطينية على صفقة الرئيس الأمريكي دونالد ترامب لوقف الحرب وتسليم الرهائن الإسرائيليين. فكما ترون وتشاهدون فأهداف الجيش الإسرائيلي ليست مقاومين أو كما يدعي مسلحين، فهي أطفال. فهذا أمير ابني أنجبته بعد 40 عاما. فكما ترون هل هذا مقاوم أو هل هذا مقاتل؟ أهداف الجيش الإسرائيلي كلها أهداف أطفال. فاستشهد في هذه المنطقة في المربع السكني لا يقل عن 17 شخص، منهم كما ترون تحت الأنقاض.
اللي نزل الصاروخ وانضربوا وطاروا كلهم هيك، وجايين علينا حتى كمان نسايب ابن عمي كانوا عندنا، وجايين بالصدفة امها واختها وبنتها الصغيرة كمان استشهدت، وام استشهدت واخت استشهدت وبنتها الصغيرة، وبنات اخويا تنتين بين الحياة والموت، وبنات تنتين اتصابوا.
All right, Israeli officials have responded to claims of mistreatment of Greta Thunberg and other global Sumud flotilla activists, calling the allegations brazen lies. The Foreign Ministry stated that all detainees' legal rights are fully upheld and noted that Thunberg and others refused to expedite their deportation. Meanwhile, Spain said that 21 of the 49 citizens detained in Gaza aid flotilla to leave Israel today, and the flotilla intended to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza was intercepted by Israeli forces in international waters on the 1st of October. And amongst the 317 detained were prominent figures, including activists and politicians. Spain summoned Israel's charge d'affaires to condemn the action, emphasizing the peaceful nature of the mission. The government is coordinating with other countries to ensure the safe return of all citizens, intensifying diplomatic tensions and calling for respect of international law and humanitarian rights. Ahmed is still with us on the broadcast. Ahmed, first question from the first story that we just spoke about. When there is, a consensus over a peace plan, and there is also a conversation taking place between Israel and Hamas towards the peaceful return and the safe return of hostages, why do you think Israel is still bombing Gaza?
Nothing can explain that except brutality and cruelty of the Israeli occupation and its complete racism and hatred to the Palestinian people that look at the Palestinian people as subhuman beings who does not reserve life or rights or to live free like all other nations. And that is entrenched deeply in the Zionist ideology, which look at Palestine as their only land, and they could do with it whatever they like. And that is a catastrophe by itself that requires from the world to discuss this later on after this madness and this genocide stops, to discuss that this ideology is extremist and fundamentally racist and supremacist in its essence and need to be revised by the international community and you need to be revised within the Israeli society. What is the point from killing children in the last moments when we know there is a peace deal, when we know that these attacks has no value, either politically, either militarily, and we know too well that Hamas accepted to give up the hostages. So it is killing for the sake of killing. And this must be, Israel must be held accountable for these crimes. Enough of this criminality. For 77 years, Israel is doing such crimes. The world was silent or was ignorant about it for a long period of time. Now we have the age of technology and information, and everybody can see. So therefore, in order to preserve our rule-based system, to preserve our conscience and to preserve our humanity, Israel must be held accountable for these crimes against humanity. Those who give decisions and order must be imprisoned and sent to The Hague. After this genocide, there must be a cycle and a process of correction and accountability for what happened. In any side, in both sides, we Palestinians are willing to uphold, and for centuries, for decades, that the international community to bring investigations and to investigate war crimes for both sides, and whoever is guilty to go to the court. But Israel, of course, refused because they know too well that they are the war criminal that will be held accountable the most.
Ahmed, what do you think is going to happen once the hostilities are going to cease? Do you think that both the countries are going to go back to the way things were before October the 7th? Or do you think there is a new blueprint now after Israel has waged this war against Hamas for, almost 2 years?
Now the world is awakened and the world is aware of the crime and the magnitude injustice that the Palestinian people are suffering. What needs to be done after October 7 is an actual peace, is a just and final peace. Without achieving that peace based on the two-state solution, without the Palestinians achieving their independence, there will never be peace. Every nation after World War I and World War II got their independence and the right to self-determination, except the Palestinians, for 7 years. And if we count the British imperialism, colonialism, that would be 108 years under occupation and colonialism. Enough is enough. We have to admit the fact. If we are after peace, stability, and to bring prosperity to the region and coexistence, then the Palestinian people deserve and have the natural right to live like all other nations and to live in peace within an independent state and a sovereign independent state, and with the right of Palestinian refugees to return. Without addressing these vital issues, without pushing into a solution for these issues, there could not be peace. If there is occupation, there is always will be a legitimate call for resistance. If Israel wants security on its borders, if Israel wants peace, then they have to lift their siege, end their occupation, end their apartheid, and to look at Palestinian people as equally human beings, not as subhuman beings, like their leaders speak in the parliament and the government. The peace must be within a framework based on the two-state solution, and what came from the declaration of the New York two-state conference in October, and followed by the World Summit for the Question of Palestine in September, the entire world, almost the entire world, come to a conclusion that we need a Palestinian state where they could express their identity, their heritage, and have all the rights like all other nations around the world. Israel vetoed this legal and reasonable and justful solution and want an endless escalation, an endless state of occupation and occupy. I hope the United States would realize that if we are after peace, if we are after reasonable diplomacy, then the two-state solution is a must, and the Palestinian has to express their identity through an independent government represented by the legitimate authority, which is the PLO, and to transition from an authority to a state. We have the recognition right now about 160 countries. More were willing to recognize. So we are talking about more than 82% of the world recognize the state of Palestine, except United States, Israel, and a few other countries. That is, they don't have the right to veto or block the Palestinians from achieving their rights.
Fair enough. Ahmed, I appreciate your perspective and your passion. Thank you so much for speaking to us. Moving on, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has said that cooperation with the United Nations nuclear watchdog is no longer relevant following the reimposition of international sanctions. He referred to the September Cairo agreement with the IAEA, which has established a framework for inspections after Tehran had suspended cooperation following Israeli and US strikes in June. Arakchi criticized Britain, France and Germany for triggering the return of sanctions, saying it diminished their role in future nuclear diplomacy. He added that the IAEA failed to condemn attacks on Iran's nuclear sites. While Western countries accuse Iran of pursuing nuclear weapons, Tehran insists its program is civilian and within the Non-Proliferation Treaty. Arakchi said that Iran's decision on cooperation with the agency will be announced soon and leaving room for diplomacy despite tensions. Mr. Andrew Latham, Professor of International Relations, joins us on the program from Minneapolis. Andrew, appreciate you being over here. Well, Iran obviously livid about the fact that its nuclear program has been halted in its feet, in its tracks. But the fact of the matter is that Iran could never be trusted with nuclear weapons, regardless of their civilian implications, and can also not be trusted in the future as well.
Well, that's correct. Iran has pursued the nuclear weapons program for quite some time now and has made real progress and was on the verge of being in a position where it could weaponize its civilian nuclear program, take that technology, which is civilian and legitimate and lawful, and turn it into a weapons, turn it into actual weapons. The entire JCPOA, the Iran nuclear deal, was meant to prevent that from happening. The latest in a long line of efforts to prevent that from happening. Iran broke the rules. Everybody knows that. And part of that agreement was, if you break the rules, the sanctions, which had been relieved under the deal, would snap back into place. Needless to say, Tehran is not happy with that snapback taking place.
Andrew, stay with us. In fact, at least 5 civilians died after Russia launched a major overnight attack on Ukraine, targeting civilian infrastructure. Ukrainian President Zelensky said that Moscow fired over 50 ballistic missiles and around 500 drones across 9 regions. 4 people have been killed in a combined drone and missile strike on Lviv, a city usually spared from heavy fighting. The attack caused fires, power outages and halted public transport. In Zaporizhia, a woman was killed and 9 injured in a night assault using drones and guided bombs. The strike damaged homes and cut power to 73,000 households. Emergency services remain active. Let's listen into some reactions that have come in after this attack.
Я не знаю, как я туда выскочила. Не знаю. Душі мені там на спині позашивали. І тут, і везде. Лають воно, все, стріляє. І я ото вийшла на вулицю. Я жила, кажу, не заходьте. А він тут лежав, а я була на вулиці. Кричала, голая, мені дівчонки обвернули. І от це ж мені там уже, мене тут все кров'ю текло, все мене.
Только встала. Я зашел в зал, а она вышла к двери. Жена, супруга находилась в туалете. И, получается, сбили этот шахет, он упал и здесь взорвался возле окна. Если бы она здесь осталась спать, если бы я не проснулся, она бы уже мертва была точно. Ну, сами прекрасно видите, что...
All right, Andrew's still with us on the broadcast. Andrew, not a single headway being made between Ukraine and Russia, despite Donald Trump, making several overtures about the criticality of this war ending.
Well, the reason why there's no progress being made at the negotiating table is because the stakes are existential for both sides. Putin feels that he cannot possibly compromise on the Donbass being part of Russia and the remnant of Ukraine being neutralized. And President Zelensky cannot possibly compromise on giving up what he considers to be essential parts of Ukraine. And he cannot accept that he will be precluded from taking Ukraine into the European Union or NATO down the road. So there is no scope for negotiating on the fundamentals. The best that can be hoped for, in my judgment, is a Korea-style armistice, which lasts not just months, not just years, but which lasts decades. Doesn't address the underlying problem, but gets the fighting stopped.
Andrew, stay with us. Russian President Vladimir Putin has commented on the possible transfer of Tomahawk missiles from the United States to Ukraine, saying that it would ruin Russia-US relations. Ukraine and other Western powers are discussing the supply of advanced weapon systems, especially Tomahawk missiles, to Ukraine. Russia has long opposed the transfer of long-range weapons to Ukraine, and these missiles supply would be significant as it would provide Ukraine a strategic deep strike capability. Newer versions of the missile can hit targets up to 1,600 kilometers away, and they can be launched from a wide range of platforms, increasing their operational flexibility. The missile's small cross-section makes it difficult for radar systems to detect, further enhancing its survivability against air defenses. Russia is opposing the transfer because it could be used to strike deep inside Russian territory. Let's in fact listen in to what Russian president had to say.
Там были вопросы, связанные, скажем, с обсуждением проблем с поставками новых систем оружия, в том числе дальнобойных систем, высокой точности, это томагавки и так далее. Ну, я уже сказал, что это приведет к разрушению наших отношений, во всяком случае наметившихся позитивных тенденций в этих.
Andrew, Russian president saying that this could spoil the relationship between the United States and Russia. But more than that, this would also change the dynamics of the war. Right now, it's Ukraine and Russia. If this is escalated at the behest of the European powers and the Americans, then obviously Russia is going to up the ante.
Well, that's correct. I mean, both the United States and the European Union and Europe's NATO partners obviously have been supplying Ukraine with weapon systems of all sorts, almost since the war began. So there's nothing new there, but there's a qualitative difference. The Tomahawks are really cutting edge and really deep strike, even though it's a mature technology that's been around for a long time. And as the front line stabilizes, which it has, incremental Russian gains one day, incremental Ukrainian counterattacks the next, the war is really beginning to turn on striking the other side's infrastructure, civilian, military, transportation, power, exports, etc. And there's a rough balance at the moment. The fear on the Russian side is that if Ukraine acquires Tomahawks, it will tip the balance in that deep strike, long-range war in Ukraine's favor, and it might allow Ukraine, if not to win outright, to have the upper hand at the negotiating table going forward.
Andrew, I cannot help but remember that exchange between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance at the White House, where Vladimir Zelensky was profoundly mortified and insulted for waging this war. It seems that we have come a long way from that interaction. Now the Americans are eager to help Zelensky. What do you make of that?
Well, I make of that President Trump wants this war to end. He wants this war to end perhaps because he aspires to have a Nobel Peace Prize, but more probably because it's in America's interest for this war to end so that the U.S. can focus on the other threats and challenges around the world in the Indo-Pacific, for example. In order for that to end, at one moment, he thinks he needs to pressure Zelensky. At another moment, he thinks he needs to pressure Putin. And that whipsaw effect, that pendulum effect, if you like, has been going on for some time now. And it's very confusing. The diplomatic signals are very confusing. But there's no doubt at the end of my mind that whether it's in his own interest or in the United States' national interest, President Trump wants this war to end and will put pressure wherever he thinks it's necessary to bring the war to an end, and quickly.
Andrew, always a pleasure having you. Thank you so much for joining us. We take a short break on that note. We'll be right back with more.